Amidst the dust and challenges of the Old West, a widow and her children faced the harsh reality of survival. One day, fate brought them a wounded stranger, a rich cowboy who, unbeknownst to them, carried within him the key to a future they could never have imagined. Prepare for a story of courage, sacrifice, and a legacy that would change their lives forever. The setting sun painted the horizon in shades of orange, but on the small Miller farm, light seemed scarce. Sarah Miller, a woman of grit and resilience, in her early 30s with raven hair always pulled back in a tight bun, was trying to keep the farm afloat after the devastating loss of her husband, a tragic accident with a wild horse just over a year ago. Grief was still a knot in her throat, but there was no time for deep mourning when two small children depended on her. Ethan, the elder, just turned 12 with a serious gaze that seemed to carry the weight of the world on his slender shoulders, already bore the burden of responsibility, helping his mother with everything from mending fences to tending to the few animals they had left. Lily, the youngest at 8, with her golden curls dancing in the wind and a smile that was a rare ray of sunshine in those arid lands, still clung to the innocence of childhood, but she felt the tension in the air, often watching her mother with eyes full of concern. The farm, once prosperous and full of life under her father's care, was now on the brink of collapse. The drought mercilessly scourged the land, transforming green fields into a dusty wasteland. The cattle, skeletal and weak, were a painful sight, and each day their numbers dwindled. Creditors, with the impatience and greed of vultures, knocked on their door with alarming frequency, threatening to seize the lands that were the last vestige of the life Sarah and her children had known. The air inside the house, a worn wooden refuge smelling of wood smoke, echoed the patriarch's absence, a void that no amount of work could fill. Sarah worked tirelessly from dawn until dusk, her hands calloused and her body exhausted, barely finding time to rest. Meals were simple, at times painfully scarce, and winter was approaching, threatening to bring not only biting cold but also hunger. Firewood was scarce, clothes were patched, and the prospect of even harder days loomed over them like a dark cloud. Ethan, his voice breaking between childhood and adolescence, tried to cheer his mother, promising that he would soon be strong enough to take care of everything, to be the man of the house. Lily often found solace in playing with the few animals remaining on the farm, oblivious to the full gravity of the situation, but sensing the melancholy that hung over her mother and brother. Her colorful drawings and children's songs were the only moments of lightness amidst the hardship. Sarah's main concern was keeping the farm. Those lands were more than just a piece of ground. They were her children's inheritance, the dream of her late husband's life's work, the promise of a future. Losing the farm would mean losing the last trace of their happy past, the last link to the memory of her love and their history. Each day, bills piled up, interest accrued, and the threat of losing everything became more real, almost palpable. The local community, though supportive and kind-hearted, also faced their own difficulties, and external help was rare, often limited to a plate of food or well-intentioned but ineffective advice against the mounting debt. Sarah felt alone, carrying the weight of the world on her thin, aching shoulders. Sleepless nights were the norm, spent in silent prayer and a desperate search for a solution that seemed never to come, a mirage in the desert of her hopes. Time was running out, and despair began to set in, eroding the little hope that remained. Fate seemed to conspire against them, and with each dawn, the struggle for survival became harder, a daily battle for dignity and for life itself. A furious storm, sudden and violent like a cry from nature itself, swept through the region. Lightning cut through the dark sky, thunder rumbled with the force of cannons, and incessant rain transformed the dirt roads into impassable mud pits. Sarah and the children huddled in their small house, the sound of the howling wind outside filling the tense silence in their souls. Candles flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls and concern for the roof. which groaned under the force of the wind, was constant. At the height of the storm, when the noise was almost deafening, a dull thud from outside the house made their hearts pound in unison. It wasn't the sound of a falling tree, nor of an animal running. It was different, heavier, more urgent. Ethan, brave but hesitant, grabbed his father's old, rusty rifle, a protective gesture that made Sarah both proud and worried. Sarah, with a knot of apprehension in her throat and her heart beating fast in her chest, carefully opened the door, shielding her children behind her. What they found shocked them speechless. Lying in the mud, soaked and severely wounded, was a man. His cowboy hat lay beside him, revealing a pale face marked by pain, with a sparse beard and closed eyes. His clothes, though dirty and torn from the fall and impact, were visibly of good quality, indicating a certain affluence. An empty revolver holster swung from his belt, suggesting he had been disarmed or his weapon lost in the fall. Clearly, he had been attacked, perhaps robbed, and left for dead amidst the storm's fury. Sarah, despite her initial fear and uncertainty about who this stranger was, did not hesitate. Her instinct to help others, even a complete stranger, overcame any apprehension. "Ethan, help me. Quick," she commanded, her voice firm. With her son's help, who strained with all his meager strength, they dragged the man into the house, a Herculean effort that required all the strength they possessed. The man's body was heavy, and the packed dirt floor turned into a trail of mud and blood. Lily, frightened and with wide eyes of terror, hid behind her mother, observing the scene with a mix of childish fear and curiosity. The man was unconscious, breathing with difficulty. There was a deep bleeding wound on his leg, and other injuries scattered across his body, including scratches and bruises indicating a struggle. Sarah, with her limited knowledge of first aid, but with fierce determination and vivid memories of her mother's lessons on home remedies, began to care for him. She boiled water to sterilize cloths, cleaned the wounds with water and rudimentary soap, used clean torn pieces of an old shirt to staunch the bleeding, and with Lily's help, who brought fresh water and improvised bandages, did what she could to stabilize the stranger's condition. The night was long and tense. The man was burning with fever, delirious, and his groans of pain echoed through the house, keeping everyone awake and on alert. Sarah and Ethan took turns soaking cloths in cold well water to try and bring down his temperature, while Lily, in her innocence, tried to soothe him with lullabies her mother used to sing to her, a soft melody that contrasted with the storm outside. The stranger's presence brought a new dimension of worry for Sarah. Besides her own financial difficulties, the drought, and the approaching winter, there was now the responsibility of caring for a severely wounded person without knowing who he was, where he came from, or if he posed any danger. Food was already scarce, and now they would have another mouth to feed, even if he was unconscious and barely eating. Provisions, already at their limit, began to dwindle even faster, a constant reminder of the fragility of their situation. The threat of more creditors, the cold intensifying daily, and now a wounded stranger in their house with an unknown story. The situation seemed to worsen by the hour, adding layers of anxiety to their already difficult reality. However, Sarah knew she couldn't abandon him. The code of the West, an unwritten set of values of mutual aid, and her own moral compass, which had always guided her, prevented her from letting a man die on her doorstep. She would do whatever it took to save him, even if it meant risking the little they had left. The decision, though difficult and fraught with uncertainty, was made with the certainty that humanity would always come first, regardless of the circumstances or consequences. The days that followed were a constant battle for the stranger's life. The fever came and went in waves, turning him into a trembling, delirious body, and his wounds, though treated with all of Sarah's care and dedication, were slow to heal, leaving him weak and vulnerable. Ethan proved increasingly useful, his sense of responsibility growing daily. He helped his mother with heavier tasks, like carrying water and firewood, and even ventured into the nearby forest to collect medicinal herbs, guided by faint memories of his grandmother's stories about home remedies. Lily, in turn, dedicated herself to small tasks like bringing fresh water for the sick man, keeping the house tidy, and sometimes simply sitting by the makeshift bed, observing the man with childish curiosity, at times a touch of genuine concern in her large blue eyes. One morning, which seemed like so many others, to everyone's surprise and relief, the man opened his eyes. His gaze, initially blurry and confused, focused on Sarah, who was sitting by his makeshift bed, changing the bandages on his wounded leg. He tried to speak, but only a weak, drawn-out whisper escaped his parched lips. Sarah, with a gentle smile and a soft touch to his forehead, calmed him and offered him a glass of water. Slowly, he began to regain his strength, and with it, his voice, which was still hoarse but audible. His first word, spoken with difficulty but with a clarity that startled everyone, was his name, Clayton Thorne. Upon hearing the name, Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. It wasn't just a name. It was an echo. Clayton Thorne was a living legend in the West, an almost mythical figure, one of the richest and most influential ranchers in the region, known for his vast fortune in land, cattle, and mines, but also for his reclusive, temperamental, and to many, mysterious nature. Rumors of his incalculable wealth and volatile temperament circulated throughout the territory, making his presence there, on that humble farm on the brink of death, an enigma that seemed too grand to be real. The revelation of his identity brought a complex and overwhelming mix of feelings for Sarah: surprise, disbelief, and even a certain fear. For Clayton Thorne's fame was as great as his wealth, and not all stories about him were good. In the following days, as Clayton recovered, the truth behind his attack began to emerge, revealed in fragments of conversation and painful memories. He had been ambushed by a group of ruthless, unscrupulous desperados who tried to steal an important document, a land contract worth a fortune that would expose a major fraud. Clayton managed to fight, but was severely wounded and left for dead amidst the storm's fury. He expressed his deep and sincere gratitude to the Miller family for saving his life. "You not only saved me, Sarah, but you gave me a second chance, a new breath to fight," he said, with a sincerity that surprised Sarah, who had expected arrogance, not humility. The twist was palpable, almost electric in the air of that small house. This man, who had arrived on their doorstep on the verge of death, was not just any stranger, but a figure of immense power and influence. Clayton Thorne's presence on the farm, though still recovering and with his leg bandaged, began to change the family dynamic. He observed Sarah's tireless dedication to her children and the farm, how she went out of her way to keep everything running, even in the face of adversity. He saw the quiet strength in her tired eyes, the unwavering persistence in her calloused hands, and the dignity she carried in every gesture. With Ethan, he shared stories of the Old West, tales of adventure and challenges that captivated the boy, teaching him to rope with precision, to identify animal tracks, to understand the subtle language of cattle, and the importance of being an honorable man. This ignited a sparkle of enthusiasm and self-confidence in the boy that Sarah hadn't seen in a long time, a glimpse of a more promising future for her son. Lily, with her innocent sweetness and free spirit, managed to elicit smiles from Clayton that no one had ever witnessed before, transforming the rich and mysterious cowboy into a playful friend and a gentle protector. He even carried her on his shoulders during walks around the farm, something unthinkable for the feared Clayton Thorne. Despite the growing closeness and Clayton's genuine gratitude, a subtle tension persisted in the air. Sarah, although immensely grateful for the help, companionship, and relief that Clayton's presence brought, still carried the burden of uncertainty about the future. She knew that Clayton's recovery was temporary, and that, at some point, he would leave, abandoning them again to their problems. debts, drought, and the burden of survival. The idea of accepting direct financial help from such a wealthy man deeply bothered her. Sarah had always valued her independence and the dignity of her hard work, and charity felt like an insult to her resilience. There was also the latent fear that Clayton's wealth and influence could attract more dangers to her family, especially after the brutal attack he had suffered. The peace they enjoyed was fragile, a calm before a new storm. As their coexistence deepened, the shadows of Clayton's past began to emerge, denser and more threatening. It revealed that the attack was not just a common robbery, but a coordinated attempt to silence him and prevent him from exposing a major land fraud that he was about to reveal. The document they tried to steal from him, the irrefutable proof of this fraud, was the key to dismantling a network of corruption, and the criminals, powerful and influential figures in the region, were willing to do anything to stop him from speaking. This revelation brought a new and terrible level of danger to the Miller farm, as the mere association with Clayton put them in the crosshairs of ruthless outlaws, hired killers who would not hesitate to kill to protect their secrets. Sarah felt a shiver of fear run down her spine, imagining the terrible consequences if those men discovered that Clayton was alive and recovering in her home. Lily's innocence and Ethan's bravery could easily be crushed by such a threat. With each passing day, the line between gratitude and worry became more tenuous, almost imperceptible. Clayton, noticing Sarah's apprehension and how she grew tenser, tried to reassure her, promising to protect them and ensure their safety at all costs. However, the threat was real, palpable, and hung over them like a dark, heavy cloud. Their forced coexistence united them in an unexpected and profound way, creating bonds of friendship, mutual respect, and even a silent affection. Clayton, accustomed to a life of isolation, distrust, and power, discovered the warmth and beauty of a family, something he had never experienced before. Sarah, in turn, found in Clayton's support, understanding, and a strength she hadn't had in a long time, a shoulder to lean her own worries on. However, the crucial question remained, hammering in Sarah's mind. What would happen when Clayton was fully recovered? Would he simply leave, abandoning the Miller family again to the mercy of fate and debt, or would their fortuitous encounter seal a new chapter in all their lives, for better or worse? The answer was yet to come, but the tension was mounting, and the certainty that something big and decisive was about to happen hung in the air, like an omen. The peace on the Miller farm was a fragile illusion, a breath about to be swept away by the wind of the impending storm. Clayton, already recovered enough to move unassisted and with his strength renewed, knew that time was running out. He needed to confront the men who attacked him and expose the land fraud before more lives were jeopardized, before the threat came even closer to Sarah and the children. However, the prospect of leaving Sarah and the children alone, exposed to a danger that now also directly threatened them, was a heavy, almost unbearable burden for him. He felt indebted to them and couldn't simply abandon them. One day, the news everyone feared arrived, brought by an exhausted traveler who stopped at the farm seeking water. A band of men, described as brutal, relentless, and merciless, had been seen prowling neighboring lands, asking about a wounded man, a rancher who disappeared. Sarah felt her blood run cold. They knew. The Miller farm was in their sights. Clayton's heart tightened. He was the target, and the innocent family who had saved him was paying the price for his presence. He tried to convince Sarah to flee with the children, to go to the nearest town, to hide in a safe place. But she, with the unwavering courage that had always defined her, firmly refused. "This is our home, Clayton. It's all we have. We won't abandon it, and we won't abandon you. We'll face this together," she said, with a determination that even surprised Clayton. The tension reached its climax. The air became thick, almost electric. Clayton, with the help of Ethan, who was proving to be increasingly mature and brave, his small face serious, began to prepare the farm for a possible attack. Improvised traps were set around the property, using barbed wire and branches. Weapons were checked and loaded, and a meticulous defense plan was drawn up, with Sarah taking a crucial role in protecting Lily, who would be kept hidden in a safe location. Every movement was calculated, every exchanged glance a confirmation of their unity against adversity. Night fell, dark and cold like an omen, and with it, the distant and unmistakable sound of approaching horse hooves. The hearts of the Millers and Clayton pounded in a fast, unified rhythm, each preparing for what was to come, for the impending battle. The confrontation was brutal and swift, an explosion of violence in the quiet of the night. The desperados, led by a cruel and merciless man known for his brutality, stormed the farm under the cover of darkness, with shouts and threats. Gunshots echoed through the night, mixing with screams and the sound of hand-to-hand combat. Clayton, with the experience of a Western veteran and the fury of someone protecting his family, fought with surprising ferocity, determined to protect the family who had saved him. Sarah, with surprisingly accurate aim for a woman who rarely held a gun, bravely defended the house, firing at the invaders, while Ethan, hidden with Lily in a small cellar beneath the kitchen floor, watched the battle through a crack, his small heart torn between paralyzing fear and an uncontrollable urge to help. At the height of the struggle, amidst the chaos, Clayton found himself cornered, with the outlaw leader pointing a smoking gun at his head. The document he carried, the irrefutable proof of the fraud, was about to be destroyed, the truth about to be buried forever. In a moment of desperation and pure childish courage, Lily, who had crept out of her hiding place, watching the scene from afar, threw a stone with all her might at the aggressor, hitting him in the head and distracting him for a crucial second. This was the time Clayton needed. He took advantage of the distraction, disarmed the man with a precise blow, and, with a swift movement, immobilized him, knocking him unconscious. The other outlaws, seeing their leader defeated and the family's unexpected resistance, fled hastily into the darkness, disappearing into the night like shadows. The dust settled, the smell of gunpowder hung in the air, and the silence that followed was filled only by the ragged breathing of the survivors and the distant sounds of horses fleeing. The farm was damaged, with battle scars on its walls, but the Miller family and Clayton were alive, unharmed. That confrontation not only sealed the fate of the criminals, but also deepened the bond between Clayton and the family, an unbreakable bond forged in the heat of battle and unwavering courage. The climax had passed, but the future of those lives, now irrevocably intertwined, still needed to be written. The morning after the confrontation dawned with a clear sky and a sun that promised to warm the land, starkly contrasting with the devastation on the farm. But, amidst the rubble of torn-down fences and bullet holes in the walls, there was a palpable sense of relief, of rebirth and victory. The criminals had been captured by local authorities, alerted by Clayton, and finally brought to justice, paying for their crimes. The document Clayton had protected with his life finally exposed the land fraud, bringing the truth to light and punishing those responsible, dismantling a network of corruption that had long plagued the region. With the threat removed and justice served, life on the Miller farm began to rebuild, not only physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. Clayton Thorne, who had arrived at the farm as a wounded stranger, an unexpected burden, was now, undeniably, part of the family. He couldn't simply leave. The gratitude he felt for Sarah and her children went far beyond words. It was an unbreakable bond, forged in adversity, shared courage, and the warmth of a home he never knew he needed. With a heart full of a new and profound feeling, he offered Sarah a partnership in his vast businesses, not as charity, but as a partnership of equals, recognizing her sharp intelligence, her unwavering strength, her pragmatism, and her undeniable ability to manage and lead. Sarah, after some initial hesitation, driven by pride and independence, accepted. It was not an acceptance out of necessity, but out of recognition of the value of her own contribution, for a partnership that promised growth and mutual respect. With Clayton's vast resources and invaluable experience, the Miller farm flourished like never before. New lands were acquired, stretching for miles and miles. Cattle multiplied into healthy and vigorous herds, and the property became a model of prosperity, innovation, and sustainability in the West. Ethan grew under Clayton's tutelage and mentorship, learning not only about managing a gigantic ranch, but also about the importance of integrity, justice, leadership, and responsibility. He became a strong, determined, and wise young man, ready to take the reins of the family's and business's future. Lily, in turn, continued to radiate her contagious joy, growing up in an environment of security, affection, and opportunities, never forgetting the innocence and courage that at a crucial moment saved Clayton's life and changed everyone's destiny. The relationship between Sarah and Clayton deepened and matured, evolving from mutual friendship and respect to something more profound, tender, and lasting. They married in a simple but deeply meaningful and emotional ceremony on the farm itself, under the same sky that witnessed their union amidst the storm, uniting their lives, their legacies, and their hearts. The Millerthorne family became a legend in the West, not just for their wealth and influence, but for their inspiring story of courage, compassion, sacrifice, and overcoming adversity. They became a beacon of hope in arid lands, an example that destiny can be shaped by human kindness. Their lives were a living testament that, even in the most difficult circumstances, unexpected kindness can generate the greatest miracles and rewrite the future. That rich cowboy, who arrived wounded and on the brink of death at their doorstep, not only changed Sarah's and her children's lives forever, offering them security and prosperity, but found in their humble farm, amidst simplicity and love, the true meaning of family, unconditional love, and a home that his lonely heart never knew it craved. The story of the widow and her children who saved the rich cowboy became a tale whispered around campfires, passed down from generation to generation, an eternal reminder that generosity and hope can transform destiny, even in the wilds of the Old West.